A continuación, la ponencia titulada Regulación de la minería oceánica, de la Convención de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar al Código de Minería Oceánica, a cargo del profesor Tullio Scovazzi.
Muchas gracias. Es un gran honor de hablar en la Academia Diplomática Peruana. Agradezco mucho al director embajador Wagner y al embajador Curcio también para esta oportunidad. Lo que es lamentable es que, siendo yo un hombre latino-europeo y hablando en un país latinoamericano, hablaré en inglés, pero no tengo bastante conocimiento del idioma castellano. The subject of my intervention, that will last for 30 minutes from now, I understand, is the mining rules that we find in the UNCLOS. In particular, the principle of common heritage of mankind, which is one of the cornerstones of this treaty. We find it in Article 136. The area, that means the seabed beyond national jurisdiction, and its resources are the common heritage of mankind. This is a completely new concept that was launched in a memorable speech made by the representative of Malta, Mr. Arvid Pardo, before the United Nations General Assembly on 1st November 1967. The principles which applied before in international law of the sea were the opposite principles of sovereignty within the territorial sea, and after within the 200-mile exclusive economic zone on the one hand, and the principle of freedom of the sea on the other hand. But according to Mr. Pardo, there was a need to establish a completely new principle, the principle of common heritage of mankind. In my view, it is the second most revolutionary principle that we find in international law. The first principle is in the United Nations Charter, the prohibition of the use of force. You state cannot make war. The second most revolutionary principle is the principle of common heritage of mankind. It means that the rich states have an obligation to share economic resources and technology with the poor states. Unbelievable, I would say. That's a very progressive principle. And according to Arvid Pardo, if the situation remained as it was before, we would have the result of a rush by coastal states to enlarge their national jurisdiction, or a rush towards the appropriation of mineral resources. And the result would have been that the strong would get stronger and the rich richer. So the gap between the strong and the weak states, between the developed and the developing state, would have increased. So there was a need to establish a completely new regime, which is based on 5 elements, and we find all of them in the UNCLOS. First, the prohibition of national appropriation of the area, there is a limit of national jurisdiction, and the limit is a 200 nautical mile limit. Then the destination of the area for peaceful purposes. You cannot establish weapons or a naval basis on the seabed beyond national jurisdiction. Then the use of the area and its resources for the benefit of mankind as a whole, with particular consideration for the interests and needs of developing countries. The idea that the benefits coming from the exploitation must be shared and must also go to the advantage of developing states which do not have the financial and technological capacity to reach the deep seabed. According to the Maltese proposal, the principle should have covered both the mineral and the living resources of the high seas, but the idea was later reduced to cover only the mineral resources. And another important element is the establishment of the international organization, the present International Seabed Authorities, which is located in Kingston, Jamaica, which is entitled to act on behalf of mankind in the management of the regime of the mineral exploitation. And then the last principle is the protection of the marine environment in the area. In fact, this is not peculiar to the seabed because there is a general obligation to protect every kind of marine environment and not only the area. You all know the story of the UNCLOS. It was adopted in 1982 with 130 votes in favor, 4 against and 17 abstentions. It was not possible to adopt it by consensus, and the main reason for that was that developed states were not satisfied with the regime of the area. According to them, it did not create sufficient benefits for private interests. It was unbalanced in favor of the authority. So there was a need to change the regime. And this was done with the 1994 agreement relating to the implementation of Part 11 of the UNCLOS, because the Convention was not ratified by developed states, and it was in fact impossible to establish a regime without the participation of developed states. So the Part 11 was changed. In fact, it was an amendment of the treaty, even if it is not politically correct to call it an amendment. And this was done to apply better, to have a better application of marked principle, to have a treaty which was more marked friendly. So the original idea was diluted, but it still remains in the UNCLOS. Now the treaty has 168 parties. The authority has started its work since a long time, and now we have regulations on prospecting and exploration for polymetallic nodules. Then we have another set of regulations on prospecting and exploration for polymetallic sulfides adopted in 2010. Then we have another set of regulations on prospecting and exploration for ferromanganese crusts. And now the authority is working on regulation on exploitation of mineral resources. Exploitation is the second phase of mining activities. It comes after exploration, and it is only with exploitation that we can have commercial benefits and we can have some resources to share. So far, 30 contracts have been concluded by the authorities with states and with enterprises or different entities sponsored by states for exploration of the area. So a great idea has put in place in international law, common heritage of mankind. And I would now say something about some problems which exist. The first problem is the protection of the marine environment in the deep seabed. We have a very peculiar and unique environment in the deep seabed. It is dark. There is a very high pressure. There are some living resources which are adapted to live in extreme environments where the pressure is very high, where the temperature of the water is very cold or very high, because we have springs of hot water coming from the inner layers of the earth, where we have hydrothermal vents, and we have a number of organisms which are adapted to live in extreme conditions. They do not rely on photosynthesis because there is no light. They rely on chemiosynthesis. They are able to transform the inorganic substances coming from springs of hot water into organic materials. So it is a very unique, fragile and unknown environment. And we are going to start industrial activities. The polymetallic nodules, which are the main resource of the deep seabed, are conglomerates of minerals, also of strategic importance, such as manganese, cobalt, zinc, copper. They lay on the seabed in a layer of dust. So when you start industrial activity to raise the minerals, you also raise dust. So you change an environment which has never changed since thousands of years. What are the consequences of this kind of activities? We are not sure about that. So we have here the interesting case of a conflict, of a clash between two different principles. On the one hand, we have the principle of common heritage of mankind, which leads towards the economic development of deep seabed mineral resources. On the other hand, we have the precautionary principle, which is a fundamental principle of international environmental law. You find it in the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. It says that where there are threats of serious or irreversible damage, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation. Where you are not sure about the result of a given activity, you should be prudent, you should stop the activity, or you should subordinate it to a previous environmental impact assessment. A clash between two principles, which one is the stronger? It's difficult to establish a reasonable balance. In fact, we have some provisions in the UNCLOS, for example, the obligation to preserve rare or fragile marine ecosystems. We have the obligation to assess the potential effects of activities that may cause substantial pollution to the marine environment. We have the power granted to the international seabed authorities to establish rules, regulations, and procedures for the protection of the marine environment in the deep seabed. And in the mining codes, we have a number of interesting rules which have been adopted by the international seabed authorities. For example, the obligation to establish impact reference zones in areas where there are authorization for exploration of the mineral resource, and an impact reference zone is an area that must be used for assessing the effect of activities in the area on the marine environment. We have also the obligation to establish preservation reference zones, that is, areas in which no mining shall occur, to ensure representative and stable biota of the seabed in order to assess any changes in the biodiversity of the marine environment. We have also the obligation to establish environmental baselines in order to assess the likely effects of activities on the environment. And the authority has the power, in particular the council within the authority, has the power to adopt emergency orders if there is a danger for the preservation of the marine environment. Then ITLOS, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, has had the opportunity to render an advisory opinion on a question relating to the protection of the marine environment in the area. There was a special chamber of ITLOS which in 2011 made the advisory opinion, and this opinion provides an important contribution towards the clarification of the regime for environmental protection of the area. For example, it says that sponsoring states, if the mining activities are not carried out by states, and if they are carried out by private entities, there must be a sponsoring states which supports the activity, and sponsoring states are under an obligation to apply the precautionary approach, and there is also an obligation to conduct an environmental impact assessment, and sponsoring states must exercise due diligence And if they do not exercise due diligence in controlling activities carried out by sponsored entities, they could be liable for compensation for damages created by such activities. In fact, the authority has also adopted a recommendation on environmental impact assessment before allowing activities. So the balance has been struck in the direction of environmental impact assessment. Activities can be allowed, of course, but you must be sufficiently sure that they are not likely to create an substantial harm to the marine environment. So the first problem also for the future, when licenses for exploitation will be granted, is the right balance between the mining activities and the protection of this very unique marine environment that we find in the area. The second problem, and it has already been examined in the previous intervention by Professor Caracciolo, but allow me to say a few words about it, is whether this great concept of common heritage of mankind should be extended to cover also genetic resources. These organisms that we find in the deep seabed have very important genetic heritage. Here we do not find in the UNCLOS any provision on the exploitation of the genetic heritage of the deep seabed and also of the high seas, also of the superjacent water. The problem was not envisaged by the UNCLOS drafters. It is not their fault because they didn't know about the future possibility of exploiting the genetic resources of the deep seabed. We cannot find in the UNCLOS even the words genetic resources or bioprospecting, which is the activity of those who are looking for genetic resources. So there is no regime in the UNCLOS for that. And we have the discussion within the present negotiations for a new implementation treaty of the UNCLOS about the possible future regime of the exploitation of genetic resources. Incidentally, the economic prospects seem even higher than the prospects coming from the exploitation of mineral resources. The exploitation of marine mineral resources is in competition with the exploitation of the same resources coming from land, so it is not clear whether there are sufficient economic advantage in starting the exploitation of resources, mineral resources coming from the seabed. While in the case of the genetic heritage, some products have been already produced, some patents have already been granted according to the legislation of certain states. So there is also the possibility of commercial exploitation of genetic resources. It says 5 minutes, 6 minutes on my watch. There is a slight divergence of views. but I will accept the idea of 5 minutes. So, the main problem is whether or not to enlarge the idea of common heritage of mankind. Why not? Why not to enlarge such a generous principle also to the genetic resources? It will be, in my view, the logical development of this great idea to share the benefits arising from the exploitation of resources which are located beyond the limit of national jurisdiction. Why to apply the principle of freedom of the sea? Freedom of the sea means first come, first serve. Why should we accept such a selfish principle? So, in my view, it will be a logical development, and I have the experience of having participated in the working group which prepared the possibility of starting an international agreement as the representative of Italy, and for 12 months also when Italy held the presidency of the European Union as a representative of the European Union. And I can tell you how difficult it is for developed states to agree on the principle of common heritage of mankind. Finally, the European Union pronounced officially the words sharing of benefits. It agreed on the idea of sharing of benefits, but still the European Union is not sufficiently clear on what kind of benefits should be shared. Only non-monetary benefits, that would be completely disappointing, because for developing states it is not enough to share the scientific knowledge about life on the deep sea bed. What is important to share are economic benefits. And still we have this difficulty. It is extremely difficult for developing states, not only the European Union, of course, but also the United States, the Russian Federation, and many other developed states, to accept the idea that they have an obligation to share benefits. And we have also another extremely difficult problem, that's intellectual property rights. Because in order to share the benefits, you must disclose from where you have taken the genetic materials that then have been patented. And according to the legislation on intellectual property law of several developed states, starting from the United States and the European Union, there is no obligation to disclose from where you have taken the genetic materials that you want to patent. So the introduction of the idea of common heritage of mankind also to marine genetic resources would entail a major change in the domestic legislation on intellectual property rights. And I'm not sure how much the United States and the European Union, they want to change. They are prepared to change their national legislation on intellectual property rights. So there are many obstacles on the way. I'm not really optimistic. Maybe the future implementing agreement will be adopted by the future generations of negotiators, I don't know. But in my view, it will be a great progress in international law if this important principle of common heritage of mankind would be enlarged also to cover genetic resources. If I have 1 minute, a last detail. Once I had the opportunity to follow a lecture given by Mr. Arvid Pardo after the adoption of the UNCLOS. He spoke about the principle of common heritage of mankind. And I asked him why did he choose the word heritage and not other words such as ownership or property. And his answer told the audience about some details of his personal life. He was born in Malta, but when he was a child, both his father and his mother died, and he was adopted by an Italian diplomat who was posted in Malta. So he went after to Italy, and he had the possibility to study law in Rome, and he knew Roman law. In fact, it is a proper place, Rome, to study Roman law, and he knew that in Roman law we have the idea of ownership, and the owner has, in Latin, ius utendi et abutendi. I have many problems in Latin because archaeologists have not yet found in their excavations records or cassettes that can document how the ancient Romans pronounced Latin, and I don't know how they pronounced Latin. My personal theory is that they pronounced Latin with a very strong American accent. That's my personal theory. But ius utendi and abutendi means the right to use and abuse. So I am the owner of this watch and I can use it, looking for the time, but I can destroy it because I can do whatever I want with my property. And he chose heritage because this means that I have an obligation to manage a given resources properly in order to share the benefit with others, developing states, and in order also to share the benefit with future generations. So that's the idea behind the word heritage. Thank you very much for your
Comentarios del profesor Pablo Moscoso.
Muchas gracias. Quisiera en primer lugar agradecer al embajador Alan Wagner y a la ministra Marisol Agüero de la Academia Diplomática por la gentil invitación para participar en este coloquio. También al embajador de Italia, el señor Giancarlo Curcio, al doctor Eduardo Ferrero, representante del Consejo Peruano de Relaciones Internacionales, y a la doctora Elvira Méndez, directora del Instituto de Estudios Internacionales de la Universidad Católica. Para mí es un gran honor presentar algunos comentarios generales sobre la ponencia del profesor Scovazzi, porque la primera vez que leí al profesor Scovazzi era yo estudiante de Derecho hace 18 años, y el Instituto de Estudios Internacionales publicó un libro sobre el derecho del mar y la Convención del mar, que tiene un capítulo del profesor Scovazzi.
You now want to ask compensation for damages?
Y desde entonces no solamente he tenido ocasión de ver ese texto, sino que también el profesor Scovazzi tiene un libro sobre elementos del derecho internacional del mar, que tiene además la virtud de tener una versión en español, y que me ha servido a mí muchísimo al preparar clases universitarias sobre derecho del mar. Pero no solo eso, sino que también su curso publicado por la Academia de la Haya de Derecho Internacional sobre desafíos del derecho del mar también es un texto esencial que recomiendo a todas, a todos, y por eso para mí, de forma muy humilde, solo deseo hacer unos comentarios generales acerca de la ponencia del profesor Scovazzi en esta ocasión. Primero, se ha referido el profesor al concepto de patrimonio común de la humanidad, y lo ha llamado además el segundo más revolucionario principio del derecho internacional. Lo ha llamado también en sus textos anteriormente el aspecto más innovador de la Convención del Mar, y se ha referido al discurso del embajador de Malta ante la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas en 1967, pero también entre los demás antecedentes quería yo resaltar que el Perú tuvo también una participación en el desarrollo de este concepto, ya que la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas en 1968 creó una comisión sobre la utilización con fines pacíficos de los fondos marinos y oceánicos, y nos recuerda el embajador Arias Schreiber en su texto sobre la participación del Perú en la tercera conferencia de Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar, que el Perú no solamente fue un miembro de esa comisión, sino que también participó activamente en sus deliberaciones. Y si uno revisa el texto del embajador Arias Schreiber, también va a ver posteriormente, durante la tercera conferencia de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar, el Perú también tuvo un rol importante en el desarrollo de este concepto, de este principio esencial, uno de los principios innovadores esenciales del derecho del mar. Entonces, es un elemento a valorar y a considerar. No es un tema del cual el Perú esté ajeno, sino que activamente participó en la historia y evolución de este principio. Y fue justamente este principio, como ha referido el profesor Scovazzi, el que impidió posteriormente y generó problemas para incluso la entrada en vigor de la Convención de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar, y se ha referido a observaciones y objeciones que presentaron estados a que se incorpore este concepto, ¿no? Si recordamos, antes que entre en vigor la Convención de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar, en noviembre de 1993, solo un estado desarrollado se había ratificado, se había adherido a la Convención. El resto eran estados en vías de desarrollo. Entonces, realmente estaba en cuestión que la Convención del Mar pueda ser exitosa o no, el conjunto de la Convención del Mar. Y si hacemos un paralelo, la Convención del Mar no es el único tratado multilateral que incorpora el concepto de patrimonio común de la humanidad. También se incorporó en el tratado sobre la Luna, en el ámbito del derecho del espacio ultraterrestre, el tratado de 1979 sobre las actividades de los estados en la Luna y otros cuerpos celestes, en su artículo 11, ¿no? Patrimonio común de la humanidad. Pero ese tratado, del cual el Perú es parte, está en vigor y es parte, solo tiene a la fecha 18 partes. 18. En cambio, el Tratado del Espacio Ultraterrestre de 1967 tiene 109 partes. Y participan como partes todos los estados que envían tripulaciones al espacio. Entonces, estaba realmente en riesgo que la propia Convención de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar entre en vigor. Y también la fórmula, como ha explicado el profesor Scovazzi, fue la adopción del acuerdo sobre la aplicación de la parte 11 de la Convención del Mar. La parte 11 de la Convención del Mar se refiere a la zona de los fondos marinos y que es patrimonio común de la humanidad y contiene toda la regulación inicial sobre la materia, que fue la que generó múltiples objeciones de diversos estados. El Perú también tuvo un rol importante en que pueda entrar en vigor la Convención del Mar, porque fue el embajador Javier Pérez de Cuellar, como secretario general de Naciones Unidas, quien en 1990 inició las consultas informales que llevaron a que eventualmente se adopte el texto del acuerdo de 1994 sobre la parte 11 de la Convención del Mar. Entonces tuvimos también, a través del embajador Pérez de Cuellar, una participación en ese proceso, que llevó eventualmente a que la Convención del Mar pueda entrar en vigor. Y sobre esta materia, sobre lo que ocurrió entre el régimen original de la parte 11 de la Convención del Mar y el acuerdo posterior sobre aplicación de la parte 11, que efectivamente, como ha señalado el profesor Scovazzi, en realidad es una enmienda. Es una enmienda porque deja sin efecto partes de, valga la redundancia, la parte 11 de la Convención del Mar, para resolver estas objeciones de diversos estados. Y en aquella oportunidad, el acuerdo sobre la parte 11, algunos autores, al hacer la evaluación de este acuerdo, arrojan un resultado negativo en el sentido, no digo que sea necesariamente mi posición, sino un resultado negativo en el sentido que algunos consideran que los intereses de los estados desarrollados vencieron o primaron sobre intereses de los estados en vías de desarrollo. Pero yo quisiera rescatar la valoración que sobre el particular ha hecho el profesor Scovazzi en sus textos, cuando incide en cómo este acuerdo fue necesario para evitar que todo el régimen de la parte 11 falle, y también la misma Convención de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar. Otros autores, como Churchill y Lowe, en su también clásico texto de Derecho del Mar, señalan que este acuerdo sobre la parte 11 fue una solución muy imaginativa ante un problema muy complejo, que demuestra la flexibilidad en la mejor expresión del derecho internacional, ¿no? Eso entonces como comentarios generales. Pero por otro lado, merece llamar la atención y reflexionar acerca de un aspecto esencial para los peruanos en el contexto de la presentación del profesor Scovazzi, y es pensar hasta qué punto las disposiciones de la parte 11 y del acuerdo sobre aplicación de la parte 11 se pueden o no aplicar al Perú, porque el Perú, bueno, no es parte de la Convención del Mar. Entonces, de inmediato se descarta que se pueda aplicar este régimen como en virtud del tratado, ¿no es cierto? Los tratados solo obligan a las partes. Y está entonces la cuestión de si este régimen es o no parte de la costumbre internacional. Y en qué medida el Perú puede o no estar relacionado con este régimen como expresión de la costumbre internacional. Pues sobre el particular existen diferentes posiciones. Algunos textos hacen referencia a cómo para algunos estados la parte 11 en su totalidad no refleja la costumbre internacional. Algunos textos indico, ¿no? Pero el profesor Scovazzi en sus publicaciones nos llama la atención del señor Ko, presidente de la tercera conferencia de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Derecho del Mar, en su discurso en 1983, al finalizar la tercera conferencia. Y sobre el particular, el señor Ko señaló que si cualquier estado intentaba extraer los recursos de la zona de los fondos marinos fuera del marco de la Convención, eso iba a ser dramáticamente opuesto por la comunidad internacional en su conjunto, y que eso iba a tener consecuencias políticas y legales serias, ¿no? ¿Por qué? Porque para muchos estados lo que está dispuesto en el artículo 137 de la Convención del Mar es parte de la costumbre internacional, ¿no? El artículo 137. Y el artículo 137 es el que se refiere a que ningún estado puede reivindicar soberanía o derechos soberanos sobre alguna parte de la zona o de sus recursos. Además, que ninguna persona puede apropiarse de parte de la zona y de sus recursos. Y además, este artículo es el que señala que son los estados, ¿no?, que integran la comunidad internacional los que, por medio de la autoridad, ¿no?, ¿y qué es la autoridad en concreto? La organización internacional creada en la Convención del Mar, es la que ejerce estos derechos en representación de las partes de la Convención. Entonces, esto nos lleva a pensar que hay algunos principios como no apropiación, no reclamación de soberanía sobre la zona, que podrían aceptarse como parte de la costumbre internacional, pero que el régimen de extracción de recursos está relacionado con la actividad de la autoridad, que es la organización internacional. y son miembros de la autoridad los estados que son partes de la Convención del Mar. Entonces, en ese contexto, a modo solo de reflexión académica, no puedo dejar de señalar que el Perú está excluido de ese sistema, ¿no? Y es algo que nos debe llevar a reflexión y a pensar sobre el particular. Para terminar, quería rescatar la visión expresada por el profesor Scovazzi, positiva, entusiasta, acerca de por qué no puede extenderse el régimen de patrimonio común de la humanidad a otras áreas, como por ejemplo recursos genéticos. Y creo que si uno tiene una mente abierta y piensa en que el derecho internacional está en constante evolución, ¿no? Está en constante evolución, y eso se vio a lo largo de todo el siglo XX, entonces no debemos descartar esas posibilidades, ¿no? Así que con eso quisiera terminar estos breves comentarios y agradecerles nuevamente por su atención.